History Colorado spent the month of February teaching Coloradans that Black history is Colorado history.
And they're creating an African-American heritage trail that will preserve and share Black stories throughout our state. A museum curator says it will eventually be an app on your phone. The virtual trail will highlight both well-known and lesser-known Black neighborhoods. They say it will be divided up into 4 regions across the state. Each region will have its own volunteers who gather content and stories. You can access the Black History Trail on the History Colorado app.
Now to a story you'll see only on News 5. On the final day of Black History Month, we're honoring a Black Colorado Springs special police officer who served our community in the 1950s.
News 5's Ashley Portillo in studio tonight with the story through his eyes and the memories of his son, Ray. Ashley?
Yeah, so Ray is so proud of his father for serving his community. That's a photo of his father, John. Now, this story began looking into the impact as he walked his beat in downtown Colorado Springs. But through weeks of research, I also found out his role as a special police officer was very unique.
I was his partner.
Over the years, Ray Brown has collected many of his father's items.
This is the badge that he wore on his duty shirt.
That, along with his father's uniform, gloves, and keys, are proudly on display at Ray's home.
It identifies him as a special Colorado Springs police officer.
His father is John Curry Brown. He also went by Jack. He served as a special police officer in Colorado Springs in the 1950s.
My father, we would drop him off on Pikes Peak Avenue, close to the Antlers Plaza, and he would get out of the car, and that would be the beginning of his beat.
Special officers were not hired by the police department, but they were given authority by the city to arrest people.
He would, of course, get out of the car, kiss my mother, and look over her shoulder and see me in the back seat and say, "After a while, crocodile," and I'd say, or he'd say, "See you later, alligator," and I'd say, "After a while, crocodile." And that was kind of a ritual that we had.
Local historical researcher Dwight Havercorn says the special officers were much like security.
Special police officers started clear back in the 1880s. City council would elect the police officers, and they would also elect the special police.
Havercorn also wrote about the history of CSPD Black officers. His research shows the first Black officer joined the department in the 1880s. Several others joined up until the 1920s. And it wasn't until the late 40s that the next Black special police officer was appointed. The next Black full-time CSPD officer was hired in the late 60s.
I don't think the department went out and recruited in earlier years until into the 70s. And then they started recruiting, and they made a concerted effort to bring minorities onto the department.
However, several Black people tried to become a police officer, including John, but they never got the job. A Colorado Springs Gazette-Telegraph article written in 1989 also interviewed John. He's quoted saying, "They just said, 'You didn't pass. You failed it. I was pretty put off at the time, but I just don't think the city was ready for it. That's my opinion.'" Businesses paid out of pocket to make sure John and another Black special police officer patrolled their area.
They pressed the police chief into hiring 2 Black officers to patrol down in the downtown district in Colorado Springs.
Ray said his father served the community for about a decade.
He had a wonderful life, and I'm very, very proud of him.
And a time he believes should not get lost in history.
He was my hero. He still is.
So I also reached out to the Colorado Springs Police Department for an interview or comment on this story. They respectfully declined because they said Officer Brown was not a member or affiliated with the police department. Allison.
And Ashley, we know you've been working on this story for the past few weeks and found out there's actually some confusion here of who the first Black officer was.
Yeah, there was. Some people thought it was John Brown in the 50s. Other people actually thought it was O.B. Brown in the 1960s, and that's because it had been so long since the police department hired an African American for the job. But the police department did share information with me about their first Black officer. His name was Officer Horace Shelby. He was one of the original 8 officers appointed at the founding of the department back in the 1880s. He served there for the next 22 years. and became the top-ranking patrol officer here in the city. Now, throughout his tenure, he made more than 3,500 arrests and never missed one day of scheduled work. By the way, Horace Shelby Park was also named after him, and that's located up in northeast Colorado Springs. Allison.
Ashley, thank you. Coloradans can learn and celebrate Black history not just in February, but all year long.
So we did a little digging to show you how you can celebrate throughout 2023. Now, if you want to stay close to home, the Colorado Springs Pioneers Museum has exhibits highlighting Black history. This museum free to the public. The El Pueblo History Museum also shares stories on Black history. And if you're willing to travel a little bit, you can learn about the importance of the Buffalo Soldiers any time of the year. That's in Fort Garland. It's on display at the city's Museum and Cultural Center. That's just over a 2-hour drive southwest of Colorado Springs. Mike?